call meeting number 6 to order. Thank everybody for coming. CLI is going to continue to make history. We have with us for the first time folks, other elected officials, councillors from band councils and municipal councils, and that in itself is part of the plan to reach out as we move forward as a collective. And we have with us Elder Stan McKay, and Stan will start us off to make sure we do things in the right way, in a good way, with an opening prayer.
Agizema tu ina nast kumwa, kasi mamu ya. Saweni menan, saweni menan, saweni menan, saweni menan. Creator, we come together this day with good purposes in our minds and hearts. We gather as relatives to plan for the future, not only for this generation, but for those who are yet unborn. We gather as family with good intention, and give us all a strong heart, an understanding of respect, and a willingness to be together in action. Saweni menan, saweni menan, saweni menan. Egusi.
Thank you. Keeping with tradition, we now ask the elders to give us some brief comments and to remind us where we've been, where we are, and as our Stan's prayer indicated, where we want to go.
The true disability is the inability to accept and respect differences. We were basically a room full of strangers, and we met for breakfast. We did some basic introductions, talked about our communities, and took some pictures. And we had the willingness to continue this journey of getting to know each other better. We all want the same things for our kids, for our communities, especially as leaders. We want safe communities, we want prosperous communities. And why would we want to try and attain those goals on our own when we can work together to do them together? I would hopefully sometime along this process, and I don't know what the next process is, but we got to start setting goals, some kind of benchmarks where we can do something together that the rest of the country is going to look and say, wow, look what these guys did together, instead of trying to fight for dollars and recognition on our own. So, big question, thank you.
Sometimes we are told very quickly to get over our past and move on. And some people don't realize how very difficult that is for some of us. What I didn't realize until I had to fill out my affidavit for the day school was how much that past still impacted me in every way. In public schools, the history that's taught to our children is still not correct. Our children are still being taught Columbus discovered this land, when really our people have been here since time immemorial. And when the settlers came, there was agreements made so we can live in peace and harmony, to share the wealth of our lands, the resources. Unfortunately, that did not and still is not happening. We've learned your languages, we've learned your ways. Work with us and do the same with us. We want to be prosperous, just like everybody else. We want a healthy future for our children, our grandchildren.
That we are humans being together. That there is a need for respect and growing sense of engagement. And I think that's been happening. When the medals symbolizing treaty relationship were shared at Lower Fort Garry, and joining hands, we are family. we are together on the land with shared responsibilities and rights. I think we need to risk changing history as Manitoba celebrates 150 years. It's a good time to make change. I'm grateful for the table that is gathered in this territory. Égoutse.
The premise of collaborative leadership says, if you bring the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, they will create authentic visions and strategies for addressing shared concerns of the organizations and the communities. And I thought that fit to a T what we have been working on for the past couple of years. So with that, welcome to Headingley. Thank you, Miigwech.
Federal government and provincial government are key partners as CLI progresses. We have from the federal government a message from the Minister McKenna.
I'd like to congratulate the Collaborative Leadership Initiative on behalf of the Government of Canada. You're redefining the goal of economic development in Manitoba by bringing together Indigenous and municipal leaders to collaborate on really important issues. This is such an inspiring initiative, and it demonstrates how reconciliation should work. That's why my top priority is getting projects built quickly to improve the quality of life of all Canadians and to ensure that those projects help build a low carbon and more resilient future.
A critical ally. We also have with us another very, very important ally and a level of government that we cannot do without in Manitoba, and that's the province, is the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Relations, Minister Clark.
Good morning, everyone. It's absolutely an honor and a privilege to be here this morning. I feel like I've come home when I can go around the room and I know absolutely everybody. That's a really good day in my world. So Indigenous people's ability to reclaim and apply traditional knowledge to current governance systems becomes one of the many pieces of the reconciliation process.
A little over 2 years ago, the Reeves mayors and chiefs of our communities agreed to embark on a journey to see if we could find mutually beneficial ways to connect our communities. The goals and desires that we have for our communities are basically the same. We also learned that we didn't know a lot about each other, but we agreed at that point to be tolerant and forgiving of our misunderstandings. Each time we met, we confirmed our commitment to the journey and we made progress. So whether it be partnering on infrastructure or recreation or culture or any of the countless opportunities we see before us, the work that we do today will put in place a governance structure that will allow us to succeed.
I want to acknowledge Treaty 1 and the homeland of our Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota people, the Métis people. Those are our relatives. And prior to Treaty 1, there was another treaty, the Peguis-Selkirk Treaty. They call it the Selkirk Treaty, but we call it the Peguis-Selkirk Treaty. And it's a very important treaty because it was at a time when I think mutual respect, order, and cooperation were really the message behind the Selkirk or the Peguis-Selkirk Treaty. I thought that was is of huge significance when we think about what we're doing here, because we're talking about cooperation and working together. It's respect. When we think about where we want to go, you know, and when we talk from talk to action, and I know we've done scenarios, that's where we want to go for sure. And I think I've always been cautiously optimistic. I'm cautious because when a door opens, you don't know if you want to look in there or if you want to go in there, right? You kind of want to peek in and look around, you know, just in case, right? Because you don't want to get caught up in another process that may not be your own. It might be somebody else's process. At the same time, we want to be able to move with our mayors because we think that a lot of the problems we face is going to take a great deal of cooperation and collaboration on how to manage the water, right? And how do we want to manage waste? And can we build off of each other's economies? And our culture needs to be around love. Our culture needs to include everyone, all cultures. We are at an economic disadvantage because of a history of systematic decision making. My grandfather was a great farmer, but he wasn't allowed to trade at the same rate, and it was hard to sustain it. And any farmer, if anybody who comes from a farming background knows how difficult it is to just, be a part of that whole industry. You have to be a part of the trade. Where does it go? All the way to where it goes, right? And if we're not at the back end of it, where our produce is going, or we're not involved in any of that, you can easily be squeezed. And economic people know what that's about. It's price, it's demand, it's all of these economic factors that create that. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and thank you again. It's an honor to be a part of this table and to continue to help the work, and I look forward to some very productive outcomes in the future.
And so this meeting is about moving to some key decisions around specific projects. Are we at a stage in this group to start to set up some administrative or governance arrangements? We had an MOU, but now we have to talk about how this group works itself. There's lots of different ways, from just discussing things with each other, cooperating, partnering. We're choosing to collaborate, which is the deepest form of trying to work together, to try to find regional, common goals. And in that way, we achieve these broader goals of the United Nations Declaration and Reconciliation, because we're agreeing to a common path. We started by saying Indigenous governments have jurisdictions. And so the idea really is about changing the way we think about each other and about how our governments can work together. On this map, you will see there's the treaties, boundaries are on this map. All of the cities and towns that are part of this part of the map, and in particular, the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region area, and the circles. The idea is, within the circles, which are, the outside circle is 200 kilometer radius from Winnipeg, the inside circle is 100 kilometer radius, so you can see the scale, the size. Any Indigenous or non-Indigenous government that has land interests or water interests within that circle, that's who was invited to the table. What we spent most of our time doing was bringing in 6 people from across the country who talked to us about really foundational concepts that represented a huge opportunity. So one was, how can we look at our relationship as founded on treaty, and that's a tool to use for all of our benefit, and what can we do to give spirit and implementation of the treaties. And Blair and Bill was obviously key in that, given his long work working for the Treaty Land Entitlement Committee in a different capacity here. Collective power increases our resources. Partnership is definitely the way to go. That we know we need to get to know each other better. It's hard to build a long-term, you don't get married right on the first date, right? You work to get to know each other, and then know that if we do that, if we spend a little bit more time in the beginning and build a strong collaboration, it then can expedite solutions. You can move through that next step faster based on trust. And then we realize we're not alone in a lot of our issues and our desires. We pitched the idea of how, let's talk about building a future economy in this region that's based on the idea of a circular economy. And a circular economy is really about economic development without waste. As we said, we want it to be based on reconciliation, so partnerships are key, of First Nation municipal governments. And then, of course, let's start to figure out the zero waste economy. What can we do? Indigenous nations had taxation structures prior to colonization, and that once colonization came in, Indigenous people were legislated out of the economy. They were legislated out of, they can't do tax. There's many, many rules, there's many issues that create this reality, but if we go back to the traditional Indigenous approach to business, trading, and taxation, we can create strong Indigenous governments that are can partner with strong municipal governments. We need to have, the CLI represents an opportunity, it represents hope to take action, but we need to move on this. We need to try to begin to deal with the issue of climate and think of our decisions within that context. Moving through the reconciliation process, do you want to try to formalize the relationship you have, and what would that look like? And we told them that, we told all of you and all of them that every meeting. And when, by the time we got to meeting number 4, they did decide to formalize the relationship that they had built over the last 4 meetings. They signed an intergovernmental MOU. This is a photo of all of the chiefs and the mayors and the reeves that participated in the signing. And I know that I was deeply honored by the fact that the chiefs showed up in their addresses to this event. It's a very significant 4-year memorandum of understanding, and says we're going to figure out how to work together. We have to figure out a governance structure for our group, and here's a whole list of the things that we want to do. Top on the list were land and water issues, waste, economic development, absolutely. It's your choice what you want to bring to this table. The chiefs and the mayors gave to each other an official restrike of the original Treaty 1 medal. One of them was gifted to the table, and it was symbolically to close the circle on the treaty relationship that started in 1871 that we haven't really implemented fully yet.
Our hope is that we are able to bring harmony to our communities and bring harmony amongst ourselves, and that reconciliation is not simply a word, it is an action that society decided to take, and that people decided to engage in that, and that their conduct and their behavior reflected what reconciliation really means, and that is harmony among humans.
You know, we're going to have some tough conversations, particularly as we get into action. As we start to actually talk about specifics that are happening in our regions or things that we want to specifically do or ask for, we might get into some difficult conversations. We're trying to lift all boats, which means we've got to think really creatively about how to do something that doesn't put us into competition against each other, doesn't make the situation worse, is actually of interest regionally, and doesn't leave anyone behind. It's a big challenge. Some of you, probably a number of you, have participated in what's called the woody waste quadrants. That's us trying to get officials from the different governments working together so that this process, this idea of working together, becomes embedded in your systems. First Nations have similar challenges with waste diversion and dealing with waste on reserves. And their recommendation to us was stop burning woody waste, but that means you have to deal with it. Very common to every single waste site in the CLI region. What could we do to think regionally, work regionally to deal with this one very specific problem? Our key funder is interested in whether you can find a solution for Lake Winnipeg. And so we have been building on a project a way to deal with the reduction of phosphorus into water that leads into Lake Winnipeg. That's the main cause of the problem that's facing Lake Winnipeg is high phosphorus levels. And so we will get into much more detail this afternoon, specifically on what we're doing. But the big picture idea is a regional ask to Canada to fund the creation of a water quality trading regime throughout southern Manitoba that is built on phosphorus reductions that you get by building a series of natural infrastructure projects. And we want to lift all boats. We want it to be Indigenous and municipal partners. We want it to be non-competitive, so it's not cutting into any of the slices of the pie that you folks are already working hard to get. We want to make the pie bigger.
One of the advantages of this table and working together is the clarity around the fact that our future is shared. This is the only table that I've ever heard that discussion happening at. So it's our lake. We have to work together on addressing the needs of it. That's why I'm so optimistic about the shared commitment on our waters and working together.
I'm appreciative of the ongoing connections and the new connections that we're able to build.
Great possibilities of us all coming together as family and working together on issues as what Scott mentioned, like Winnipeg. And these are issues that we're going to have to deal with this group, and I look forward to a successful conclusion of it. Thank you.
I think it's important that when we talk about Lake Winnipeg, you know, I mean, Sagig is at the mouth of that lake and the river that comes into my community, right? And we're affected a lot by what happens in Lake Winnipeg. You know, and we don't oppose all those industries that are happening in our territory, but you have to understand, we need to protect that water. That's our livelihood. We fish, we hunt. You know, when it gets hurt, it gets damaged, the people get sick. We all get sick because of the water. We need to talk, right? So we're there. So there's a lot of things that we can do together, and I really appreciate this opportunity this morning.
I mean, just in the morning break here, was talking to Deputy Mayor Jim Robson, and you know, we had recently dedicated a section of land as natural tall grass prairie in our community, and we were talking about when it gets warmer, you know, how can we maybe engage Swan Lake or you know, the Indigenous community when maybe we have an opening or a, and so I think for me, it's just, I don't have any specific stories other than just the overall mindset as to how can we work together and include each other in our everyday community actions. Thank you.
We've done a lot of work to connect our communities in the South, and we have our own challenges trying to work amongst ourselves, and you know, and on the business side, and trying to coordinate things so that we are linked. So I should address the water issue right now. We're moving towards water authority. That's where we are. In Manitoba, there's been a regional office that's been in charge of all decisions that are made on reserve, funding decisions. So the average of Manitoban and Canadian actually think, oh, well, they made all the decisions. But no, we haven't really made all the decisions. We actually get the decisions for us, and we go to them and we ask, can you do this, can we do that? And that's not really governance, and it doesn't really help in terms of trying to structure governance, because they're still deciding who the priority is. They're still deciding, you know, strategically what's in the best interest of First Nations. So we're being led along, right? And that's a hard part, because then we're not doing really it for ourselves. And we can be exploited by firms and consultants and people who have a lot of money, right? When you're working with a group of people who are managing poverty day to day. That's what our chiefs do every day. They're managing poverty. It's very different. You're in constant crisis, right? Because every day hundreds of calls about simple things like doorknobs and holes. And when really we should be talking about big policy issues, you know, funding envelopes and how we can structure investments to get the biggest return. So that's where I think when we work together, we can actually help each other. That's where we need your help. And then we can be even better partners, because now we have control over our own finances.
In Rosser, we have a provincially mandated development area called Centerport, and we have started the conversations as to how First Nations, Indigenous communities can be part of that development. So that's an offshoot of this as well. Councillor M said to me, and something to keep in mind as we go forward, she said, how are we going to connect the way you have connected? Because we have, as a group, connected on a very personal level. We've shared stories and we've done that. And we're inviting a broader group in to join with us. And I think we have to figure out how we do get everybody kind of connected on that same way. And that's something that we can talk about going forward. Thank you.
We just committed a fair amount of dollars to our engineering work, but we included Broken Head in our plans originally when we did our feasibility study, but more recently we invited them in for a conversation and a a briefing of where we are with that project. We're doing a protocol as a first step to a shared service agreement. And so what the document is intended to do is basically form the ground rules for what a service sharing agreement would look like.
Well, I think sitting around this table, I've definitely learned a lot about some of our neighbors. For those that don't know, the Broken Head First Nation is in the middle of the RM of St. Clements. So for me to get to the northern part of my municipality, we do have to go through the reserve. Although we spoke, it was not on a real chatty basis. It was more, we were butting heads all the time. I have found since sitting around this table and getting to know the chief and councillors a lot better, that our relationship is a lot better. And I guess I do have to kind of echo what Mayor Hart has said, is we have been invited to many different functions and events on their territory.
For myself, in the beginning, I sort of wondered, what am I going to get out of this? Like, how's it going to affect me? How's it going to benefit me in my community? So, and I have to say, I'm very happy that I did join, and I've learned a lot and made those connections with the people here. But more so for me, it was about learning about this process, learning from it, and learning about how to build those relationships, as this would be the first opportunity to work with First Nations in creating some economic development and an addition to reserve initiative. So it's a very exciting time for both of our communities. Dauphin has been very welcoming and jumping right in and allowing us to move through this process. I know it's going to be a long process, as many of the leaders here know. It doesn't happen overnight, but I think they're very motivated.
I'm Clive Hines, and I'm the mayor for the town of Stonewall. What the statement has brought to me is a deeper feeling of what inclusiveness means, and that we are here as part of reconciliation to bring everyone together and to amend and to fix the past. And I might not have been born in this land, but I'll tell you, it didn't take us long to figure it out, that there is those that are at the front and those that are at the back. Let's bring us all together. So what this statement has done for me is bring more of an inclusiveness and open me up. And now that I'm a leader of a community, to step up and make it known to those. Chief Jerry Daniels, prior to his death, had promised me that he would come to council. And he was invited to come to council and sit with me so that the rest of my council members would see that we are together as one, working on the same goals and the same needs. And that's what we have to do. Thank you so much.
I have found this group so inspirational. One of the great words spoken by one of the elders, and I'll never forget, and we should never forget, we all eat the same food, we drink the same water, we breathe the same air, we live on the same land. So when do we all get along?
What this got for me was people talking together and trying to work together, and bringing it to council, which brings council together and talking.
We can assume that over the next 20, 30 years, our communities are going to grow. Immigration has fostered the growth of our city and our communities over the last 10 years, and we can assume that will continue to happen. And it has an impact on land use. It has an impact on water consumption. It has an impact on water and on waste. And learning with our First Nations community how we're going to grow sustainably. So I'm fortunate to be at this table to have these shared experiences that we can learn from each other and implement the best practices, the best ideas, and learn from each other on how we're going to make our community sustainable as we experience growth.
Since CLI started, we have Peguis that has built a medical mall. Together, we're going to drive that dream and that economic opportunity for Peguis also. I'm proud to be partners with Peguis. Thank you.
In my work and in our efforts with the UN, one of the things that we see is most threatening to our future is divisiveness. Divisiveness in and of itself stands in the way of us dealing with local problems, regional problems, and in particular global problems. And what I have been saying about this process is what I've learned here is that you can't solve problems like Lake Winnipeg without changing the governance structure. And you can't change the governance structure without reconciliation. And I think this is reconciliation in action. I think it proves the most important thing that the UN is concerned about, that we leave no one behind. And I also believe that this is hope for Lake Winnipeg and hope also for the future. Thank you.
Change happens in big cataclysmic ways, big chunks, big monumental events, but it also happens through small things, that the butterfly effect kind of change, where small things just shift and they keep affecting other things, and that's part of what this is about too, is the choice that each of you make back away from this table to do something different with your other governments that are in your territories. At the risk of being, as Michael would say, emoting all over the place. But I was really moved by Chief Daniels, Grand Chief Daniels' comment this morning about the culture needs to be about love. That's the thing we're moving towards, the basis of our relationships with each other. And Clive, your comments about prejudice and hate and things like that. And because this process has its foundation in a process that came out of South Africa, I wanted to bring up a quote that I found that your comments reminded me of from Nelson Mandela, which is, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite." I think you're leading the way. You're tackling some of the toughest issues that get in the way of progress. But you've never been there with First Nations together, thinking about what could we do together with our land, with your land, with our issues, our opportunities, your opportunities. What can we do together? Our different taxation structures, our different authorities, and that's what we really hope to be able to organize, to take all of you, or as many of you as we can, there to talk about how can the circular economy kickstart what we're trying to do. The goal is zero waste. Long-term, big, audacious goal. You've got to have them, otherwise you never get there. So this map was provided to me by Hank Benma, who's in the back corner, from Strategic Community Consultants. And you can see, if this is the Lake Winnipeg watershed, the total that goes into Lake Winnipeg each year is 10,000 tons per year. It's coming mostly from the red area, which is between 25 to 70 kilograms of phosphorus for every square kilometer. Below the Canada-US border, it's a slightly lighter color of red. That is from 8 to 25 tons. So we can solve the Winnipeg problem, we definitely should. And then we have a much bigger problem to solve also, right? That's not going to fix Lake Winnipeg. We need a broad solution to actually address the problem that we care about as a region. 75% is from agricultural watersheds. And the reason why this is so relevant to this table is because you folks are the leaders with decision making in that white circle. That's where your territories are. Our task is to find something that you can decide to do that could have a monumental change. Water quality trading based on natural infrastructure.
Agricultural watersheds also have a natural phosphorus load. It's not only fertilizer runoff, there's also natural phosphorus loading that comes from extreme rainfall events. But yes, both sides of the border approximately the same.
I'm a commissioner for the International Joint Commission, and I get more information about water than I ever thought was possible for a human to be exposed to. And one of them is one I remember is that voluntary measures don't work. they're just not working. I mean, some people do some things, but it's not enough. Regulation, putting in a law that says you must do this, doesn't work. Those people tend to not vote in those people next time if you do that. The final thing is market mechanisms. Make it so that people see their own self-interest in making money. So that's the only thing that seems to be working anywhere, is creating a market to try to make money out of reducing phosphorus. So the water quality trading process says, okay, how about, what if we found money for those farmers and those First Nations or those folks, the non-point source people, what if we found money for them to do some little projects that reduced phosphorus? If, for example, say you took marginal farmland or some land that is of low value and you replanted it with wetlands or trees or something like that, you can do a whole bunch of other things. And that's why the Government of Canada cares about this and is funding it right now, because they have greenhouse gas reduction targets. They have a whole bunch of things they're trying to achieve. So if you do what's called a natural infrastructure project, you can slow and store floodwater. We have problems with floods here. Build more habitat, produce biomass, recycle phosphorus, build stronger shorelines and riverbanks. So it's called co-benefits, and that's why people are all keen on using natural infrastructure to do this stuff. An independent group buys the credit from the farmer, so the farmer doesn't have to figure out, or the First Nation doesn't have to figure out who to sell it to. All they have to do is get the credit, and then they sell it to, think of an NGO, they're called aggregators. They're a third-party entity that holds all the credits, and then what they do is they sell the credits to people who need them, people who want them, who maybe aren't in compliance with their license or want to be good corporate citizens or what have you. And that's why it's a market. Somebody does something that's valuable, they get a credit for it, they sell it, someone else who needs it buys it. And in the process, phosphorus is reduced. Let's see if we can make this work. You could accomplish this water quality trading regime, and our vision would be a series, 40 to 60 interconnected natural infrastructure projects throughout the CLI region that support a water quality trading system. What I think, though, is U26, it would be pitched as a model for the rest of Canada, every place you've got a nutrient problem. So that's the big idea, that's the game changer on this. We're at the point where we've got the people lined up, we've got many of the small financial asks in process to try and do the first and second steps. But we would need to know if you folks are interested in doing what is the political, it's your reason, it's what you do, but would do it together in terms of a federal request.
I think this is exactly what we've been looking for. It resonates in so many different ways, like you're saying with like Winnipeg, with agriculture, with our communities. Does anybody see any drawback here?
My fear, though, is the ICIP funding. It seems to be a tool that we see it, we know that it might be available, but is the purse strings being loosened? And that's my fear. If that could work, then definitely we have a path to go.
This is a strategic, when the federal government makes discretionary funding announcements that are not within existing programs, they usually call it a strategic funding announcement, a strategic ask. And this would be in Catherine McKenna or Cabinet of Canada's discretion to give a big block of money outside of regular infrastructure asks, outside of regular Indigenous money. This is adding more money to the problem, not competing with any existing program.
And we've already said we don't accept the status quo. Do we want to save the lake? That's what we have to ask. And if we are all in agreement, then we have to think about what are the paths to get us there. The lake has kidneys, you know, like it has the net reliable marsh, which is suffering right now. And so you have to stop the flow of phosphorus in order, well, we even think about trying to repair that at some point in the future, which is a huge undertaking. I know everybody likes to find other ways to define these things, but it's a kind of a tax is what it is, and we're trading it. We're trading for new, right? So So I would think about that, the messaging, when do we want to get the money to do this?
We have to build the ground, we have to lay the work for this type of a budget ask to be accepted. That's why this is a political decision for you. And that's why the next agenda item is administrative, because you would have to do something like create a steering committee of key people from the 26 that want to move and work with the institutions that are supporting you. Reconciliation requires change. If 26 leaders say, we can solve a problem together, but we can't do it using exactly the same way everything is done. We have to, there's new things that are required, and here's what we believe is new in order to solve this problem.
What we learned from Ms. Fox is that it's not so much a tax. You find money because if you don't save Lake Winnipeg and your agriculture goes and your tourism goes, you spend more money than you'll have lost more money than you'd ever spend trying to fix it. She told us that what they do is the farmers put in 25 or 30 cents on the dollar and they find the 70 cents and they combine it, and it allows the farmer to improve their own productivity and do good things and get the work done, and it meets a societal need that's a critical priority, which is saving the lake, protecting industry, and doing all these good things. Back to the issue of, we're going to talk about other opportunities, but clearly we're running out of time.
I just want to know that I've been around the block on this one with Marilyn, and because what we've seen widely globally is that pure commodity markets, like for example, water licensing markets, they can get away on you. And what's different here is the natural infrastructure element, and that has to be clear. And so that speaks to Grand Chief's advice, because this has to be really carefully understood to be sold effectively, so people will not automatically oppose it if they oppose markets, and so that they can see the benefits of it, and they can see the long-term gain of reduced nutrient inputs.
We bring this to you because it's been done in other places. It's feasible to do this. There's a political aspect to this. We need to move this forward. How do we do that? And that's where the champions within CLI to move this forward.
Certainly interested in a next step, but I guess if you could just maybe articulate for us, if we say yes to this and we establish this subcommittee to start doing some of the work, what can we expect if the feds say yes, we'll do this? Can it bypass the province? Does the province have to be on board with this? Because then, which is fine. The more stakeholders that would be open to a pilot project, the better. But, and then final comment, maybe speaking as a finance chair of the city, I wouldn't want any federal funding for anything that anyone is doing. A lot of questions there, Marilyn, but I know you have all the answers to those.
The strategy of connecting into the federal system, into the ministers. We all have different access points. We all want to make sure we're not stepping on other things that everybody's doing. It's the raise all boats, non-competition model. One of the reasons why we ever even brought this to you was because the Climate and Green Plan put out by the province on page 38, I think, says we are interested in market-based mechanisms to deal with phosphorus, including water quality trading. I mean, if you folks can figure out this problem, they are probably willing to support it. They've sent a signal. And keeping in mind, Grand Chief said, we are not in support of a provincial regime regulating Indigenous people. So that's one of the interesting spins on us here, is that there's no water quality trading regime in the world that is based on both provincial, federal, municipal, and Indigenous jurisdictions. We'd be first in the world on that.
When you have big polluters being able to spend money so they can keep polluting, always worries me. And I think of a fertilizer plant coming to a municipality and bringing 200 jobs and all the rest of it, and paying $1 million for credits. To them, that's just the cost of doing business, but it doesn't really solve the problem. And I'm not saying that's not a good idea in Ohio. We have to look at the big picture here. And I've seen the past with credits, so that's just my comments.
The thing about changing the status quo is you're changing systems, and as Chief Daniel said, You're not going to do it in the short term, but you're going to do it in the long term. And if 26 leaders start coming forward with positions on how they would like to see money, even current money spent, that would be a way that's more effective and more reflective of the region's needs, then you're going to start changing those systems. To start with, we don't want to be looking like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but the long-term benefit of changing the status quo is systems will start changing.
We just think it needs to be a political discussion that happens rather than us saying that you're ready, or do you want that? One way that we can move forward is for at least 2 people to agree to be on the steering committee.
Could I suggest Rick Gamble has been a trooper at this particular thing? What about you, Rick?
It can be both. I said at least.
It's always better to have a model to go off in order to do it.
Well, I nominate Grand Chief to sit on. He works for us, as he says.
That's why we want a steering committee. Okay, so I have Grand Chief, technical support, Fran, and, okay? So we've got 3 on the steering committee. Scott, I think you had your hand up. You can't take it down.
Sherry Rollins. Sherry Rollins said she'd help support.
Sherry Rollins said she'd help.
Capacity.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
Thank you. So you'd be willing to sit on the steering committee? Sure. Okay.
You're not going to walk through that door alone. We'll be walking through it together and things will get changed. So this phosphorus thing sounds very interesting. I encourage our committee to do their research, and I know they will. And what they come back with, you might not like it, but you might think it's great, or it might need to be tweaked. I look forward to seeing what you guys can all accomplish. I know you got great determination and heart in this, so thank you again for letting me be part of it.
We have taken that incremental step, which I think is a major positive going forward. Incremental, but carefully, step. And that's where we're going, and I'm very, very pleased to be part of this.
I do want to, I guess, apologize to the group for my hesitancy to jump onto the committee. I was thinking, oh my goodness, my workload. And then I looked around the table and thought, everyone else has the same workload. We're all busy people. So I'm looking forward to being part of the steering committee. Looking forward to trying to, work with everyone to bring some solutions. So it's exciting days. It's really exciting days, and I'm glad to be honored to be part of this group with all of you.
Thank you all for being here. I think it's important that we do sit across the table and sit by each other and start discussing some of these common issues. But we're no different, right? We're just neighbors, and sometimes we don't say hi to each other. So I think this is such an important thing that we need to do. I would host it at the Turtle Lodge if Dave's okay with it, so it'd be an ideal location.
I'm looking forward to the next meeting in Saginaw at the Turtle Lodge. And just to the work ahead. It sounds like we're going to be very busy, especially the steering committee. So just looking forward to moving our agenda forward and the first big game changer. So thank you very much.
It's an opportunity to explore this initiative and to maybe look at a project that's going to be a change for the lake, because somebody mentioned that it's got so many opportunities for our community, from sustenance, for fishing, to pleasure, to just the health of the lake in general. So I think we just have a great opportunity here, and I look forward to what the steering committee comes back with in May. Thank you.
Right, I once again would just like to say thank you to everybody for allowing Headingley to be the host today. I would have offered everybody a trail walk in our community today, but I don't think I would have been taken up on that offer. So I just want to say that we've had all of the meetings up to this point have been fantastic, and it has been great getting to know everybody, and hope to continue to get to know everybody even better. But I just have to say, it's, as leaders, I think we're all action people, so it's great to see that we're now starting to take action.
As I was listening to
drafting of the working committee, what's in the back of my mind is the province of Manitoba just recently announced they're going to make drainage of agricultural land easier. So there are counter forces, I think, at play in the environment. There will be agriculturalists who don't want to give up their marginal lands. So I think the challenges are great. But the fact that we can sit together and look at the possibilities and take action may be politically dangerous, but very necessary.